to show the critical role that design can play. 47% of all plastic waste comes from packaging. Massive design opportunities, people and planet-centered design that is really needed. So as well as using design engineering to create these new low carbon technologies, we need to work with people to make sure that they are easy and accessible and inclusive to use for everyone. And we need to shift from a linear to a circular and then to a regenerative future. Thank you. It is so lovely to be here. I can't quite see you all. I had a brief glimpse and I can see there's lots of people in the audience. And I'm so sorry not to be able to be here in person. Oh, there we go. I can see a bit more now. I'm so sorry not to be here in person. I've got a little baby and I've got my own festival next week. So I'm in the middle of planning that. I'm the Chief Design Officer at the UK Design Council, and my talk will cover aspects of design for mobility, net zero and circular design, and alternative business models, themes of this conference, and stretch a little bit into regenerative design, but always with people at the heart. So design shapes the world. Everything that hasn't been created by nature has been designed. And some things have been well designed and some things not. And designers have a huge power and a huge responsibility to do this well. We all know that the climate crisis is upon us. The latest IPCC report is a code red for civilization. And in July this year, at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center in the US, they recorded a near global record-breaking temperature of 53 degrees centigrade. And of course, you in India have experienced the hottest March on record, a heat wave lasting 4 weeks with temperatures between 43 and even 46 degrees. And we all know that rising temperatures across the world are having a knock-on effect on our climate, rising sea levels, flooding, hurricanes, and you've been experiencing this for years, and most recently in flash flooding in the Himalayas, cyclones Amphan and Biparjoy, and Delhi having some of the highest rainfalls in 4 decades. And in Europe, these sorts of extreme weather conditions are becoming more common too. We've seen flash floods in Central Europe during the summer, and extreme temperatures, not just in the summer months, but actually last week here in London in October, it was nearing 30 degrees, which is absolutely extraordinary. And this is not only having disastrous impacts on our homes and our cities, but also our natural world. We know that in the last 50 years, there's been a nearly 70% decrease in our wildlife population, huge deforestation, and as well as having this reduced biodiversity, particularly for plants and trees, limits one of the most important ways that we can sequester carbon, and therefore it's just increasing this vicious circle. So we're at a real it's not just an issue for our natural world, but obviously for people too. The climate crisis is a justice issue, and it's linked to deep systemic inequalities. The richest 1% of the world's population cause twice as much carbon dioxide as the poorest 50%. So many people in the world living in particularly vulnerable communities are facing a climate crisis that they just didn't experience. So we're at a complete tipping point. And we think that design is part of the solution. So design is needed for sustainable and autonomous futures, the name of this conference. And on the flip side, we think that bad design probably has been part of it. Bad design has made us buy things that we don't need and that we don't want particularly. Bad design has used cheap and toxic materials that have harmed people and nature in their extraction, their use and their disposal. And bad design has focused entirely on a small number of people's needs at the expense of wider humanity. So just look at some of these statistics to show the critical role that design can play. 47% of all plastic waste comes from packaging. Massive design opportunity there. 80% of the environmental impact of any new product is determined at the design stage by the choice of the materials used, how they're extracted, how they're created, how they're used, rather than kind of later down the line. So it's the designer engineer who has got that responsibility. And 60% of the emission reductions needed by 2035 will require societal and behavioural change. And that's what's crucial to designing with people. Because design has to be central to the change, but it's people and planet-centred design that is really needed. So as well as using design engineering to create these new low-carbon technologies, we need to work with people to make sure that they are easy and accessible and inclusive to use for everyone. And also by designing with nature, seeing nature as a client, putting planet into the brief, so that we're designing not just to make people thrive, but also nature. The Design Council in the UK was set up in 1944 to use design, and very much industrial and product design at the time, to deal with the biggest challenge of the time, which was to get out of the post-war economic slump. And this is the picture of the very first Design Council that took place. You can see there's ashtrays on this table. That certainly wouldn't be allowed nowadays. And the people at that table were thinking about how to really promote good design to turn us from a wartime into a consumer society. And 80 years on, the climate crisis is the biggest challenge that we face as a humanity, and we need to transform design to help shift us from a consumer to a regenerative society. And our mission, Design for Planet, aims to galvanise the 1.97 million people in the UK who work within design, and those that commission and support them, of course, to use their creative powers to address the climate crisis. Now, that number, nearly 2 million people, is tiny compared to the number of designers that are in the Indian design ecosystem. But just to give you a sense of scale, that's about 1 in 20 people in the UK workforce. Or if you include those who are using design skills but might not be designers, that's 1 in 7 people. So that is quite a lot of people. And together they contribute about 100 billion GVA. Again, that's small in comparison to India, but that's 60% of what our financial services and banking services, things that we're very famous for, contribute. And so imagine if some of that, or all of that, was steered towards a green economy. So the way we work at Design Council is we do that in 3 ways: voice, knowledge, and trusted strategic advice. And voice is part of what I'm doing right now. We're always shouting about and sharing what we think to be the best examples of design and how it can be part of a regenerative future. We then distill and share knowledge about how to design for planet and the evidence that commissioners need to use to commission it, and also policymakers need to support it. And we provide trusted advice to government, to large institutions, and to businesses to embed regenerative design in their organisational sector. So to give you some examples of what really good design for planet looks like, and when we say design for planet, we always mean that people and planet are part of the same thing. We talk about it we break it down into 3 ways: net zero behaviours, circular material use, and regenerating biodiversity, all in a just and equitable way. And for this conference, I've tried to draw out some of the examples where technology and AI are being used in all of these different places. Just to start with net zero. Transport in the UK is about 1/3 of our carbon emissions, and I'm sure it's similar in India. And there needs to be a huge shift to electric vehicles. And as many people who are speaking at this conference will know, I'm sure, and there's been probably lots of conversations about it, there's been huge innovation in electric car design. The Tata Ravinia has won the Green Good Design Sustainable Award 2023, not only for a longer mileage range, 500 miles, but also its AI-powered, roomy and calm interior made from sustainable materials means it's a really good experience for people to drive. But as well as the car and the product design around the car itself, we need to think about the wider infrastructure. So as well as the roads and the highways, it's also about the charging infrastructure. And in the UK, we've got many, many different types of charge points. And so in 2019, the government put out a competition to design an iconic charge point, the equivalent of the British phone box or post box. And we launched it at our festival 2 years ago. Now, since then, that hasn't taken off as the kind of the standard. It's not red or anything like that. But it has also sparked lots of people thinking about how to make that more inclusive. And Doku is an innovation organisation who created this lightweight electric charger for those who might be using wheelchairs. And you have to think about the wider infrastructure as well. Stations, rail stations and bus stations, which are becoming increasingly smart and using technology to be able to make people move around the stations in the right way, make sure that the transport is running when people need them, to think about the efficiency of the buildings. And always with AI, it's so important to design it with people. And we recently carried out the largest ever public engagement programme with Network Rail, which is our national infrastructure provider in the UK, called Explore Station, where we work with 30,000 people up and down the country to co-design with them what their future railway stations might look and feel like. So on to energy then. Again, here we have to see a massive shift to renewables, and by 2035, electricity needs to be fully decarbonised. In the UK, there's an organisation called Octopus Energy, which has design at its core. And I think this is where kind of design engineering and human-centred design really come together in a wonderful example. So as well as design engineering to create these cathedral height wind turbines, there is also micro attention to detail to create accessible and, above all, joyful UX experiences which motivate and reward people to switch to renewable energy. And recently it's collaborated with Power, which is a community energy collective, community collective in a part of North London, just up the road from where I am now, which has installed solar panels on all of the roofs of the local street you can see there, so that the communities themselves, they can provide energy to the grid rather than just taking from it. And so creating entirely new business models, again, powered by AI to know when energy is needed in the first place. So moving on to circular design. And a circular mindset is not a new concept at all, and certainly for the Indian innovation ecosystem, making and remaking have been part of your culture and our Indigenous culture for forever. And of course, frugal innovation makes sense. Use as little as possible, reuse materials and care for them so they last as long as possible. But over the last 200 years, as mass manufacturing has made production easier and cheaper, the world over, this has, of course, changed. And current business models have built in ubiquity, smartphones, laptops and cars being the best or worst, actually, examples, urging people to buy the latest model with repair either impossible or extremely expensive. And fashion is one of the worst culprits. Traditional fashion seasons make us desire new trends, and fast fashion has led to a buy once, throw away culture. And as well as being awful for the environment, we know that the conditions for textile and garment workers are often extremely terrible. However, there's been huge growth in the formal commercial circular economy over the last few years, and the World Economic Forum says that it could have a market value of around 4.1 trillion US dollars between now and 2030. So to give some examples, but to show about the kind of the wider kind of tech and services that are needed around products. Let's start with products though, and I love this example of circular design by the people at Carbon Craft in Mumbai, a tile made out of air pollution using waste and also preventing air pollution as well, because it's capturing it. And each tile prevents 15 minutes worth of air pollution. And they are absolutely beautiful, as you can see. But as well as designers thinking really ingeniously about how you can reuse materials and take someone else's waste and turn it into your own material, designers have to start thinking about how to design for disassembly and repair in the first place. Because repair is so expensive because things are just not designed in this way, and it's cheaper just to throw them out. But some designers are starting to design for disassembly and repair. Fairphone is the world's first modular phone, and in the UK, Batchworks and Marama have created these kids' headphones, which are not only just made out of recycled materials, but are made so that you can take them apart really easily and fix one aspect of them rather than the whole thing. But this is where the technology comes in, because as well as circular designs means always not just products but services. And if you're going to recycle, reuse, or repair a product, you have to have a service to collect it, take it away, fix it, or make it into something else. And if it is repaired, bring it back. And in the fashion industry in the UK, there's been an absolute explosion in online shops that sell secondhand clothing, or that rent secondhand clothing, or that offer subscriptions. And so this is one that I'm using at the moment because I've got a small child that goes through lots and lots of different clothes all the time and outgrows them. So instead of buying them, I subscribe to a rental service. So I get new clothes every 3 months for her, which then I can just send back and get the next size up. So these sorts of innovations are completely shifting business models as well. And the technology and the AI that creates the really good customer experience, making it super, super easy as it takes to buy something new, to return what you already have. And part of circular design is using this in the first place. And again, on-demand production is growing, which not only uses only what's needed, but is usually locally produced, so that reduces energy in transport and also boosts local employment. And the Pattern Project is a network of AI-enabled neighbourhood microtextile factories in London, where patterns are digital, clothing is produced after it is ordered, so there's no waste, and customers are also offered repair workshops and clothes swaps. And then finally, Visa has just launched its new platform, which provides services for brands to recoup and resell their clothes. It's called Recommerce, and it encourages customers to send back and buy secondhand. And that is offered. They're offering it to places like H&M and Mars, so big European brands. So circular design then is not just about the products and materials, but it's also about working with people to work out what services make it as easy as possible to them, and also the economic model that goes around it. And in our industrialised and throwaway society, we need to fundamentally rethink waste and see it as a precious material, as so many makers and tinkerers naturally do. So finally, I'm going to move on to regenerative, increasing biodiversity. And again, this is good for people and planet. There are so many benefits to nature, as well as giving us a wonderful world to live on, which are also good for people, for their health, reducing air pollution, improving mental health by being in calm and natural places. So regenerative design has its purpose to create life or let it flourish. And it flips back out what our designs are for. So we start to see here buildings that create rather than use energy, and materials and products that grow, and places that build people's skills. So starting with buildings, there are lots of buildings. I mean, the smart technology available in buildings to reduce carbon is well documented, and there are lots and lots of amazing examples of this. But there are also buildings that can grow energy, and solar power is the most obvious example. But so many buildings are also using AI technology to really help. So this is the Active Classroom in Wales, which has created 1.5 times the amount of energy that it uses. And the AI-powered sensor data innovation is able to help it rapidly, significantly reduce the energy used during its construction and operation. We also have to think about growing nature. This is a really nice example. Growing Underground is the world's first subterranean farm in South London. It's based on circular regenerative principles, but it uses data and AI to measure absolutely everything to become more resource efficient. So as well as using recycled substrates, recirculated water, growing their products close to consumption to minimize the food miles, they've also been collecting data on temperature, humidity, airflows, CO2, microbiology, pathogens in the water, the temperature of the water, absolutely anything you can imagine they've been measuring so that they can continually improve. And I can't ever do a talk without showing a picture of a wetlands somewhere in the world, because I think wetlands are one of the best designs there are going. This is the wastewater agriculture in Berry in Uttar Pradesh. And rather than paying for an expensive $22 million per year for water treatment, the wetlands here are able to naturally clean 700 million tonnes of raw sewage and provide water and lakes for fishing, which makes the whole process more regenerative and circular. It's added to my collection of amazing UK wetlands that are preventing flooding, providing places for people to exercise and relax, and grow materials to pad our winter jackets even. And so much about, as well as with the kind of the technology being used by engineers to design these buildings and make sure that they're always as resource efficient as possible. Technology is being used by communities to help understand nature in the first place and understand where communities can most make a difference. So this is a project called Green Minds in Portsmouth, which is a town in the south of the UK, where communities have been given sensors which they put in local parks to then sense what nature is doing and identify places where they could rewild themselves. And this is a lovely project I came across the other day, which I thought I'd share, which is, again, sensors being put in coral reefs. And then Google Arts and Culture have created a platform where anyone can go to listen to the reefs, which gives you a good indication of their health. And by pressing when you hear something, you can help train the AI to track where reefs are healthy elsewhere in the world. So design is clearly needed for sustainable and autonomous futures. We're arguing at Design Council that it needs to be people and planet-centred design. And what does this mean? Well, we've created our systemic design framework, which is our evolution of the world famous double diamond that some of you might have come across. And as well as the kind of the double diamond shape, we've also created 6 principles that we think are really, really important. And I'm just going to talk you through 3 of them. So we need to, at the fundamentals, we need to move from pound to people to planet. This is our design value framework that you can find on our website, and it helps designers plot not just what economic value they're creating through their designs, but also what human social value and also environmental value they're creating as well. And that's so important to consider, because what you value to begin with will determine what you produce at the end. And we need to shift from a linear to a circular and then to a regenerative future. So moving away from a type of design which just extracts and then throws away to something that keeps materials in the loop for as long as possible, and then onto something that actually grows our natural environment and grows people's skills and helps us all to thrive. And then finally, we need to absolutely design AI with people. We did a recent workshop in the UK where we got lots of designers together to talk about AI and their concerns about them, and as well as being a little bit concerned about kind of AI taking their jobs and that sort of thing, most of the designers were actually more concerned about how AI is being used in wider society, how it's being used to make decisions about mortgages or health insurance, or to determine which places get better transport than others, for example. And all of these things have got ethical implications, of course, both in the amount of the decisions that is made, and that's often determined by the type of data that's used and how biased it is, but also in the decision that gets taken as a result. And obviously AI is becoming increasingly powerful, but there is always someone who sets up the AI in the first place. And so making sure that we design the AI with people, having conversations with them, is incredibly important. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about our Design for Planet Festival, you might well be festivaled out. But next week, we're having our Design for Planet Festival in the UK, 17th and 18th of October. But it's all completely free online for anyone to join. So if you liked any of the examples that I was talking about, there will be many more next week. So thank you very much.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to nasscom YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.